blue side. SK, because they lost, got to decide which side they were on, and they picked red. And immediately, a little bit of a switcheroo here. The Akali ban coming out, a Zoe ban as well, following it up here from Splyce.
Interesting that they're taking away some of these mid lane champions. Akali, of course, can also go into the top lane, but just removing some options that I think would fit into SK's draft as a third pick, where you can sneak that one away on red side now that SK are over there, and then ban away a couple of counters. That seems to be the approach here for Splyce, as they leave open some champions like the Silas, like the Lysandra, that they expect to be red side bans perhaps.
Right, the Silas is a red side ban this time, coming out from SK. There's the Carthus ban as well. The Rise to follow it up here from Splyce. And what are we looking at still open? Things like the Lysandra, as you said, the LeBlanc, Morgana still there as well if you want that kind of strong mid lane push priority.
Yeah, and I'm looking at maybe a Lysandra first pick here in the hands of Humanoid, putting them on something that can try to initiate fights. Again, Splyce banned this in both of their previous games, and you just have to take this champion away from Pyrion. The consistency that he has had on that pick is too much, and now Humanoid can have a big impact here as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Lysandra pick, it also does very well into the LeBlanc that has been left available as well. Does mean that things like Orianna would be a pretty good pick. I don't think you need to pick it right now, but I think it's something that we have seen Pyrion play before. I think it's a champion that he's pretty comfortable on, and I think that it is something that you could draft as well. Azir is the other thing you could think about. I think that it does pretty well into the Lysandra matchup. It depends on how much experience Pyrion has on the champion, but it looks like for now, SK going for very solid, safe picks. Gonna blind the Thresh and go with the flexibility of the Jarvan as well. Means that they have a lot of room to flex around with their draft.
Exactly, and they also have just tools to start fights off. This was a big weakness of their draft in game number 2 this time around. Jarvan Thresh, there's not going to be any questions about when they want to be starting these fights. They can snap, do that almost immediately, and look to play much more instantly in this game, because that was a struggle. They played proactively last game, but not able to find all the plays that they can now.
One of our favorite duos in Duo Q Ender is this Lysandra Rek'Sai combo because of how easy it is to set up the Rek'Sai for success. You provide a lot of utility. You can set up a lot of ganks early on as well, and even if you're running the cleanse, it can do very little against the kind of damage that this duo can bring.
It's just such a strong mid-jungle 2v2, and we highlight this in every matchup because I thought it was so pivotal for SK, but the fact of the matter was, Xerxes Red self-made like a book in the last game, and now he's on a stronger early game champion with the Lysandra in the mid lane as well. We turn our eyes towards Xerxes, who was one of the best junglers in the regular season, and clearly stepping up to the plate to perform today.
But we do see SK use that powerful third pick on red side to lock in the Jinx for Crown Shot. We saw this incredibly well from him in that G2 series where they were able to come back from behind and beat out G2 in the regular season. They then get rid of things like the Sivir and the Kennen to remove some of those power picks from Splyce.
This, to me, suggests that SK may be looking at a Hecarim lock-in right now. I'm just thinking about what else I think Splyce should look to ban the Hecarim right now, because with the Kennen gone, you don't actually have that many options in terms of what's good into it, especially with the Yorick banned away as well. I just feel like you'd be hamstringing yourself by leaving it open, because I think it's then just a big, hey, you can take this and give a pretty favorable and comfortable matchup for World in the top lane.
Well, they are going to decide to leave it open, and now I think SK can go ahead and get themselves a mid lane champion. Now, the Zoe we saw in last game was banned away. Does Pyrion want to try his hand at the Azir? SK Gaming looking to go much more on the scaling side of things. This is interesting to see from them because it's such a large departure from game number 2. This is when, for the last 50 minutes of that game, the coaching staff behind the scenes was working out a strategy, working out a plan. It seems to be strong team fight to beat Splyce their own game.
What? Wait. So this Lysandra top, Vel'Koz mid?
Yeah. So Vel'Koz mid is actually a classic counter pick into the Azir. Very strong.
LCK love it.
Yeah, they absolutely love it, along with like Lethality Varus back in the day. But the reason is you can quickly push the waves. Hold that thought, because this is going to be a Jace bot lane.
Carry.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to break things down. We're going to start with the Vel'Koz, because that's the first thing that came in.
I think we leave some of those specific breakdowns for when we get into the game, for now we'll talk about how SK deal with answering this. Like, you've seen a Vel'Koz and a Jace come out, you have your probable top laner left to pick. What is your response?
So, I mean, the response has got to be whether or not it's top lane Jarvan or the Gragas, and they go with the Gragas in the jungle. They're going to match with the Jarvan, and now I'm just wondering, like, is Splyce actually on blue side? Because this looks like SK is playing blue side with some of these early game champions, not a very strong team fight, and SK are red.
So, MSI 2018, I want to say.
Last year, yeah.
Chitan, the AD carry player for, I want to say it was Kaboom at the time. He played a Vel'Koz bot lane a lot.
Yes,
it was a very special pick for him, and we even got to see it at the MSI play-ins as well. And early levels, it doesn't look that good, but the moment you hit level 6, it's actually devastating, especially against AD carries that don't have the ability to dodge and dive away from the knock-up and the all-in power that Vel'Koz brings. And the reason why you pair it up with a Tahm Kench is because he provides that safety and defensive power, because you've got to remember, Vel'Koz is very squishy, easy to dive on. Against a Jarvan and a Gragas, there's a big risk there. So the reason why you run this matchup is it's basically just keep the Vel'Koz alive, and he can 1v2 this lane with the wave clear and poke that he can provide.
Yeah, keep him safe while the rest of the comp is built to be super explosive. This top side of the map from Splyce is very strong. They're trying to redefine expectations of fans, of analysts, of how they like to play the game. And SK, they're looking to do the same thing Splyce just did to them. They're looking for the scaling. They're looking for the team fight strength.
But we know SK is not the type of team to slow a game down.
No.
And if they see an opportunity to fight, I think they will. So 1 item, 2 items, don't be surprised to see this SK lineup looking for fights around the 15 to 20 minute mark.
Well, it's been an exciting first 2 games of this series, and Game 3 is set to not disappoint at all. We have a Vel'Koz bot lane coming out here from Kobe. He's got teleport, he has Noskaran to back him up, but guys, I just want to know, how does this Vel'Koz bot lane really work?
So, the thing is, you'll notice that he's running teleport and he's also running the Comet, right? Very effective poke tools, and he will have a lot of wave clear, but not at the early levels. The base damage on a lot of Vel'Koz's abilities is not very strong. I'm very curious as to whether or not he chooses to max the Q or the W, because the W is definitely much more of a wave clear tool, whereas the Q is much more of a poking harassment kind of tool. But the level 6 mark is really the scariest point, because if you ever get knocked up and all 3 of the dematerializer passives apply, you just get melted by the Vel'Koz.
Yeah, Vel'Koz also bringing a lot of true damage to the table as well and can cut through some tanks later on. But speaking of that level 6 all-in, I think it is important to note that in the 2v2, I don't think Tahm Kench offers a whole lot when it comes to locking down some people and looking for the full channel of that death ray. So that's where players like Xerxes or Rome from Humanoid are really going to come into play, because those are the members that have the CC to really set up for Kabe to crush it.
First time we have ever seen a Vel'Koz AD carry or bot lane in the LEC history. We have seen it as a support. I'm finding out exactly when that was, but...
a long time ago.
It's...
And of course, LEC includes EULC.
Yes, yeah. Imagine being Kobe in this situation. You get into Game 3, it's like, okay, if we go a game down here, we are match point away from being eliminated from playoffs. You are the player on your team that is stuck around through thick and thin, been with the team through the Worlds run in 2016, through all of your playoffs runs in 2018 as well. And you say, you know what, guys, you know what? Pick me Vel'Koz AD carry. I've never played it before on the big stage. No one has ever played it bot in the LEC history. Chuck that one down and let's see how SK deal with it.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because he's the bot laner that made the first all-pro team, and he's just playing only AD carries and really excelling in the late game team fights. The spacing with his auto attacks, and it's a very different style here. Xerxes finds his way into the top lane, but doesn't want to commit the flash for the kill. I think he actually could have. Verula wasn't level 2.
And you told me very specifically that Rek'Sai can't gank at level 2, which is why you never gank mid lane at level 2.
Okay, I just want to say, I used to play solo queue with both of you, and I no longer get to play solo queue with either of you.
That's because I always lose with you. And I always win with Betty.
Yes.
We have like an 80% win rate together. It's nuts. But so basically, yeah, let's
talk about
the Rek'Sai, because you called it up. With a Jace in the top lane, when a Jarvan at level 1 is face checking into, I do think you have some tools to at least burn the flash and maybe then look for a follow-up. But yes, level 3, when you have access to your tunnel, as well as the true damage bite, is really where the Rek'Sai comes online. And once again, it's the Halo Blade Xerxes for the early game pressure.
That it is. Pyrion actually running Electrocute on the Azir in the mid lane here. We saw Comet in the last game. I thought Venius would be a little bit surprised by that. Not very common that we see the Electrocute Azir.
So what is important to remember about Electrocute is it is any 3 damage sources from the target. And so the cool thing about Azir is, especially when you when you can get 3 of your soldiers out in rapid succession, you get actually a 50% additional attack speed on top of the bonus attack speed that you get from your passive, which means that you can very quickly proc those electrocute for a decent amount of burst.
Look at this mid.
Humanoid unable to get in there, but Xerxes with the flash forward. Pyrion uses the cleanse and shuffles his way to safety, but does burn both of his summoners, and Humanoid keeps his flash.
Yeah, he's going to be fully denied a wave here as well. So low on HP. That's a big win here for the side of Splyce, who didn't even have to use the flash on Humanoid.
And it's exactly what we talked about in the draft, and this is why we love this duo so much. It's so easy to set up these kind of plays in lane, because the amount of utility Lissandra provides, and just the amount of damage Rek'Sai has. Hail of Blades, Ender talked about it in game 1, you so quickly stack up the Fury. You want on the bot lane.
Yeah, Crownshot having to flash away there. You can see how much damage Kobe can put down. We talked about the level 6, but even before that, if Northscaring can get close to them, start slowing them down with that Tongue Lash teleport coming in into the top lane as Humanoid. He looks for the flank. Whirlib on the wrong side of the map does have his flash, but tanks up a tower shot, uses the flash. Humanoid flashes forward as well. Whirlib's going to use the EQ combo. You can still chase it, but I think... Oh, his TP's out.
Wait.
Humanoid! Ring of Frost! Ooh. No! Doesn't spot him!
Beautiful stuff there from Whirlib. Does the Soaz and gets out of that situation. Walks away with his life. I just wasn't a fan of Humanoid flashing after, especially seeing as Whirlib never actually used his flag and drag once the original TP came out. So Splyce invest a lot towards the top side, don't get much for it, and this has given Pyrion a bit of freedom to get some farm in.
Exactly, the advantage that Splyce had in the mid lane in terms of summoner spells, especially with level 6 rolling around for Humanoid very soon, is going to be going away. And you can see Selfmade is changing up his style a little bit here in this game, knowing that Pyrion has no protection in terms of his own summoner spells. He put down a couple of control wards so Pyrion can hug this bottom side of the lane and know he's going to be very, very safe.
So, quick update for any Vel'Koz bot lane fans out there. Kobe is currently maxing the W. He has 2 points in it. Going for that wave clear style, and he's just going to keep forcing this this Jinx underneath the tower. Keep making the life very difficult for Crownshot during the laning phase. And again, keep your eyes once that level 6 mark hits, because if Kobe ever lands the E, that's going to be a dead Jinx.
It definitely is. Dream's looking for the hook there, but Kobe just steps behind his minion. Already, as you say, they're pushing in that wave. They're getting the turret plates as well. Xerxes sneaking in here towards the top side as they know Whirlib doesn't have the flash. If he uses that flag or the drag, he could get caught out.
And what Jarvan will often do when a lane is in this position, he'll use his Q to last hit. And once that's down, that's when Xerxes will look for the engage. But Chachi's giving this too far away, I think. Whirlib, they have to wait for the first spell. And right now, the rest of SK are actually making their way up.
Here he goes. He goes in with the EQ. Whirlib chased away here by Xerxes, but Selfmade on his way with the Predator. Looking for the body slam, lands onto one. Chachi flashes away. Xerxes gets the unbow. Chachi trying to turn it around. Xerxes, full fury, they get him! Whirlib will answer with one of Pyrion on his way up. Chachi, no flash, of course. Whirlib trying to get away, knocked back with the hammer shock. And Chachi will survive.
I'm very surprised that Splyce decided to run away from that rather than just commit to the 2v2, because you just saw how much damage that duo actually had. And the fact that Xerxes just nearly straight up killed Selfmade before he lost his own life just showcases how strong Hail of Blades Rek'Sai is in the other game.
Yeah, it was the concern of Pyrion roaming up through the river and them not knowing exactly how close he was that made them want to escape. But I agree, had they just stuck it around, maybe could have gotten a kill, but ultimately going to be a 1-for-1 in the end. And now with the flash off of Selfmade as well, there's just, I mean, when summoners go down, you see Gragas versus Rek'Sai, you just expect action.
They definitely do. SK trying to mitigate some of that as much as possible in this early game. They know that Splyce have these power spikes, the level 6 Vel'Koz in the bottom lane, the 2v2 with Humanoid and Xerxes, so powerful if they can catch out Pyrion. But SK seem to have the scaling advantage, you know, and Azir and a Jinx are going to be so powerful in that late game.
So it's one of those things where you are right, but Vel'Koz in the late game is actually really scary, and it's difficult to compare because obviously they provide slightly different roles as a Jinx versus a Vel'Koz, but the late game I think will definitely be an interesting one in this time around.
Difficult to predict.
Yeah, but the reason why is because you have things like Rek'Sai versus Gragas, and what I really want to focus more on right now is just how the early game looks, because you'll notice that across the board, Splyce actually have advantages everywhere. They did build up a pretty significant advantage in the bot lane, but because Akobe just went back to base, that's now equalized. In the mid, thanks to the early gank from Xerxes, Humanoid is sitting on a lead, and Vizichachi's just been dominating in the 1 versus 1. So Splyce in this laning phase are actually looking very confident and comfortable, and they've already built up a 500 gold lead.
And what I want to see them do do more of is actually splitting the map down the middle and playing towards Vizicachi on the top side of the map, because I think it's relatively easy to give some pressure quickly towards Humanoid in the mid lane and then use that pressure to go up top lane whenever a minion wave is crashing and zone Whirlib off of that experience. I think the bottom lane is safe enough, and you can see they're getting a lot of work done in the 2 versus 2 that you can leave them on their own, know that with the Tahm Kench they are safe, and play fully around building up CS leads and knocking down turret plates on the upper side of the map.
You can see already a 16 CS lead for Chachi towards that top side. Whirlib backed and got the Ninja Tabi, just delaying any damage you can get in his kit, because he needs to be able to resist some of those Jace auto attacks.
So another fun fact about Vel'Koz, Kobe has actually decided to go 2 points in W, 2 points in Q. So he has a bit of extra wave clear, and he's got a bit of extra damage in the poke.
So just in case people don't know exactly what Vel'Koz's skills are, the Q is the
geometry
orbs that he chucks out, the geometry, the A squared plus B squared equals C squared, the Pythagorean theorem. The W is the little liney boy that he throws in front of him that does damage. And the E is called tectonic disruption, and is a little circle of bounciness that happens from time to time. You'll spot his ultimate, it's a big flip-off laser.
See, now I can't help but think that whenever Vel'Koz lands the E, he's saying to himself, drop that B, and then you've got all this, like, dubstep coming in the background.
At the moment, all that's happening is Corbe's just continuing to push up that lane. They've got 3 plates. Xerxes waiting just around the corner here, misses the Prey Seeker onto Pyrion. Could have just gone for the bow, but Pyrion does still have the Flash Cleanse combo to get out. Corbe takes a big chunk of damage down towards the bottom lane as the Super Mega Death Rocket did connect.
And look at the pathing here from Selfmade. He has his Predator boots available. He can look for it, but Xerxes is here as well and can counter.
Dreams has Flash Flay, has the Lantern as well. Selfmade coming in with the Predator, but not going to find his target. And Splyce have about 1,000 gold lead as we come past the 10-minute mark. We talked about how strong they can be in the early lane, how taking these plates will help them so much. SK need to find a way to mitigate some of this damage.
Interesting that Pyrion actually started with the Lost Chapter here.
Why is that interesting?
Well, because normally you go for the Nash's Tooth first, which is, I'm pretty sure, the Fiendish Codex plus the Stinger, right? So he's actually just invested in mana early on. And I'm going to make the assumption that he's actually maxed his Q rather than his W. Yeah, he has. So he's actually just taken full points in actual poking in lane and trying to just get that kind of initial burst damage out rather than the sustained damage that we more regularly see from many as is.
Yeah, and I think the idea here is that at 2 items, you're going to hit 40% CDR very early on as we see an all-in top.
Yeah, Whirlib went in with the EQ combo. Chachi just trades back onto him, and Humanoid coming in. The flash forward. There's the Glacial Prism. Locks Whirlib in place. The stopwatch isn't going to stop time for long enough. Cataclysms EQs away. Humanoid with the Glacial Path across the wall still has the chase potential. Nice Shard will connect, and a long-range Shock Blast is enough.
And there we have it, Xerxes and Humanoid playing around the top side. This is exactly what we needed to see out of them. Now with a 2,000 gold lead at the moment, Kabi's just going to try his best to clear away these minion waves. It's difficult, but he's got Norscaron on the way, ready to defend him.
Needs to be careful of the potential dive, but there is a TP available on Vizicachi as well.
Dreams tanking up the tower here. That's 3 tower shots actually caught out. Kobe gets so much damage down with the Lifeform disintegration rate, but it's not quite enough. They survive the dive, and they force SK back.
You called it, Vedius. The level 6 damage from Kobe was disgusting right there, comboed with the turret shots coming in. They're able to defend and stay alive.
But you're also seeing the power of the Tahm Kench in this matchup as well. It makes it so much harder to try and force a play onto the Vel'Koz because he has a lot of poke and utility in his kit with like a slow and the knock-up. And if he's able to apply those 3 stacks as well, he can very quickly turn a trade back in his favor. And if it wasn't for a clutch stopwatch from Dreams, that would have been a kill going over to Kobe, but ends up being no kills, and Splyce are just happy with the lead they built up top lane.
SK sitting quite far behind in terms of plating at the moment. It's so important to talk about plates when you see like a lower kill early game, but with advantages being taken by Splyce, because they've taken down 3 plates in the top lane, 1 in the mid, and then 3 down towards the bottom side already.
And by the way, while that dive was happening bottom lane, Xerxes secured his team the Herald as well. So he has 1 more minute to look for a plate gank and to grab some extra dollars here for his team. But SK have different ideas. Dreams and Selfmade are waiting because they think something's going on over here.
I mean, this is where I'd plate gank
coming down. They don't know.
Jump here, and there's the hook straight onto Xerxes. Knocked back with the play as well, and he's down. Dreams gets him. Humanoid now running for the wind as Selfmade comes in from the side. Doesn't have the cast available, and Humanoid will just be able to get back to his tower.
That was the great debate there from Piri, and Xerxes thought he had him, but brilliantly done. Now Crunchshot has to flash.
Flashes away from the dubstep beat that Vedius was expecting from with that Tectonics disruption. Infernal Drake on the cards here for SK is the second of the game. We talked about the splitting of the map for Splyce, playing towards that top side. This is what you sacrifice. Now Cobby misses the Tectonics disruption, did have the ultimate if he wanted to go for the steal on the Infernal instead. SK will get it. 4 members down towards the bottom side. That's their second Infernal, 14 minutes in.
Surprised that we actually saw Warlord get brought down to the Dragon, because now he's just going to lose even more up towards top side. But this is the great bait, as you mentioned, Ender. The thing is that SK were so aware that Xerxes was around, and they were just poised for this gank to happen. Just really good response. And then the Tahm Kench ultimate, I'm not actually sure how it got interrupted, but you could see the animation start, and then it didn't follow through. So the support from the rest of Splyce wasn't there, meaning that SK could fully commit to that fight. But when you just look at the gold, even though that was a great play for SK, it's heavily in favor of Splyce.
Yeah, and Splyce definitely have the game going the way they want it to right now, especially using this Herald to try and break this mid lane. Sure, I think both teams are actually relatively happy because with the gold earned from Triple H, 1440 on the side of Splyce, they have the early money they need to finish a snowball, whereas SK are comfortable falling down a little bit early on and relying on their team composition as well as the double Infernal Drake scaling to really take... Oh, wait a second.
Not enough to take down Crown Shot, but almost there. Tower will fall in the bottom lane. I did have a look back. The Abyssal Voyage was cancelled with a zap from Crown Shot because, of course, if you take any damage during channeling that, it cancels it. And now, all 3 towers down for Splyce at the 15-minute mark. They have a 4,000 gold lead. And if you want to catch more of the action, you can go over to twitch.tv/RiotGames2 and our YouTube channel to watch Humanoid's POV. It's been pretty exciting so far. A lot of roaming around the map, a lot of teaming up with Xerxes as well. LEC fans on Twitter can actually vote for which top laner will be featured in our next game's POV, Whirlib or Visit Chachi. Spam for your favorite now in chat.
So what I find funny about the POV stream is it's actually a really good example of how and when to roam. Because what you'll notice is that Humanoid this game has spent more time top lane than he has mid, right? And if you're playing against that, that's very frustrating as a top laner to have all this pressure sent your way. But he's also been able to keep up and even stay ahead in farm. So the fact that he's been able to maintain this experience and farm and gold advantage while still roaming top means that he's picking the right moments in order to make those plays. So a lot of props to Humanoid in order to find these leads for his team.
It has about a 20 CS lead. There's about 15 down towards the bottom lane in favor of Crown Shot, but Chachi miles ahead in top, getting chased down here by Selman, who flashes him, uses the cast back. Whirlib there on the chase. Abyssal Voyage comes out from Nosker and doesn't even need to use the Devour on Chachi, just walks away from it.
And Chachi, oh my, he holds onto his flash during that as well. He has the phase rush to help him get out, and of course, the channel of the Abyssal Voyage from Norscairn. And look what's happening on the opposite side of the map. It's Visit Chachi absorbing the pressure while the rest of his team is able to get some small advantages, start chipping away at the tower, and setting up for more plays. Because ultimately what Splyce need is they need darkness on the map for SK, and then look with the tools they have with themselves, with the Lissandra and the Rec side to find a good fight.
It's been really impressive early game pressure here from Splyce. Not heavy on the kills, but continually finding the chip damage, finding those advantages. 17 minutes in, they're about 4,500 gold ahead. And it hasn't always been the story of Splyce as well. We've talked about them as a strong early game team that kind of falters around the mid game. Now I want to see them use this strong early game lead they've established to really accelerate the game into that mid game.
Just as a quick note as well, you guys can see the vote in the bottom left. It's actually very close
Super
between
close.
Chachi and Whirlib. Many people excited about the 2 top laners.
Who would you guys want to watch?
I would probably want to watch Chachi. Like, his cannon has been really cool, and he's now played Jace as well. So I think I would want to see what he brings next, because I can't remember what he played game 1, but it's his 3rd different champion now.
I can definitely remember
it was
Google it. It was GP.
GP, yeah. So he's played 3 different champions in 3 different games, so you know you're going to get something new, which is why I think I'd probably check that out.
I just want to say that's faulty logic. Just because he has played different champions doesn't mean
that's
that
definitely not how it works.
That is completely accurate.
Oh, okay.
Unlike you.
Right, speaking of unique champions, I did get informed by our stats team, Kobe is on his 14th different champion this split with the Vel'Koz, the most of any AD carry, and he's pushing through the mid lane here. Crown Shot takes quite a bit of damage as Kobe gets gobbled up by Norscarin, but continually Splyce just doing this kind of two-lane split with the Rek'Sai rotating between the two lanes.
Yeah, and because we're so early on into the game, there's not even a Baron up just yet. So Splyce have actually done a wonderful job of building up an advantage with a 5,000 gold lead. And the next step for them is going to be go pick up their first strike of the game, because right now they have all the control in the world over this bottom side of the map. And then they can eventually transition that into pressure around the Baron, which they need to close this game.
So what's really fascinating about this game is SK have drafted heavy team fight. Right? And in a team fight situation, obviously what you want is the enemy to group up so that you can fight them.
Yes.
The problem that they have right now is that Splyce they built an advantage bot lane, and they built an advantage top lanes. They have two strong side lanes.
Oh, it's a fight in mid lane. Glacial Prism is used it onto Crown Shot. The path comes out as well, but Chachi just with the flank position.
So you end up in this situation where you can't actually force anything because you're being split apart too much. So you never actually get that 5v5 because you're forced to like catch all the waves that are being pushed. And even if you try to, Jace is really strong, and so is the Vel'Koz. And it's really difficult right now for SK to actually force anything. And their best bet is to just slow the game down as much as possible. They want to get to 2, maybe 3 items, and then play around a Baron, because that will be the best scenario for them to actually get that 5v5 where all of Splyce will be grouped up and they can finally engage with maybe a Jarvan flank or a Gragas flank.
Yeah, the Baron is so important when you see the sort of dynamics of split push versus team fight, because ultimately between the 25 and maybe 30-35 minute mark, the team that's trying to split push needs Baron to actually close and be able to take down inhibitors or inhibitor towers. So they get sucked in to this idea of they have to get this Baron, and what the team fight team can do is actually just forget the side lane very quickly, bring their split pusher up with the rest of the team, and force the split push team to go for the 5v5, and that's what SK will eventually look to do once they have the items, as Vedius said.
It just feels like they're not quite powerful enough yet, and especially with the poke that can come out from a Jace, from a Vel'Koz, from long range. It's always hard for SK to find those perfect engages, but maybe something in the middle lane as they group up as 3. They need to be making sure they soak up this side wave experience as well. You can see Chachi and Humanoid in the side waves. SK will need to be getting all of that CS, or at least as much of it as possible, without giving up too much in the mid lane.
Once again, we see Splyce just splitting up the map, playing along all 3 lanes. They have good vision control around the Baron right now. They haven't been able to set up really deep vision, but they do have wards kind of littered along the entrances. And to be fair, SK have done a good job of just maintaining control, at least over the top side of their map. But everyone is resetting right now. Vizichachi, you need to go back to base. I got informed by the stats team that last game, Vizichachi had his 23rd isolated death. Yeah. He has this habit where he dies.
Isolated.
And it's because of situations like we just saw, where he's kind of pushing up towards that tier 2 and the rest of his team has got back to base. And it's one of those, it's like a player said, I just need one more wave, right, Ender?
Yeah.
I just want to, like, it feels like both teams are happy with the pace of the game at the moment, and we talked about SK wanting to slow it down, but it's not often we get this kind of chance to break down exactly how a team is going to take the next steps and what the perfect execution of the next steps for a team would be. Splyce here well in the lead, they're about 6,000 gold ahead, but how does perfect execution of this team comp from here on look?
Right, I think it's a difficult one to pull off because, again, 1-3-1 comps, and it's why you don't see it a lot, they're just not very easy, because ultimately the line of thinking behind them is it's not about getting a big win ever. It's always about chipping and chipping and chipping and building up your lead until you reach this point of critical mass where you're just so far ahead the other team can't fight you. So right now, Splyce have done a wonderful job because they're up 6,000 gold at the moment, but ultimately it's by playing through Vizichachi and allowing him to push the towers and eventually threaten an inhibitor. Right now, Splyce are going to control the top side of the map to force SK and potentially look for a pick while the split happens.
And you can see Splyce just have a little bit of vision here as they spot out Hyperion on that control ward. Selfmade waiting around the top side as well, but they continue just to go for this split map. And CrownShot will just try and clear out the waves as much as possible. It's chip damage by chip damage here for Splyce.
So you just asked Medic kind of what are the next steps and what are we going to do. So I've asked the observers to bring up a full screen mode for the time being. And what you'll notice is that pretty much consistently, Splyce have pressure in all 3 lanes. They have the wave always pushed up as far as possible. And then every time they get that vision control, they then slowly move their wards in deeper and deeper into the top side primarily, right? Now the problem for them is they've actually had to reset because they've lost a lot of their vision. They've expended a lot of it. And this has allowed them to group up, as you can see from SK, and actually force some plays. But then you just got Chachi up towards the top side, pushing towards the tower, chipping away at it.
I mean, that tower's going to go down.
This is exactly what you were saying, Ender.
Yeah, and Vizichachi is just doing such good work right here because SK did it a little bit early. I think they grouped up to find a fight too early on in the game. That meant that Vizichachi never had to TP in, Splyce didn't, or SK rather, didn't find the engagement they wanted. And now that the inhibitor is exposed, playing this composition actually becomes way easier because we know Chachi smashes in the 1v1. So what he's going to do is he's going to walk up to the inhibitor, it's going to pull down 2 members of SK, and the second that happens, it gives Splyce the numbers advantage to pressure on towards the Baron.
And a few minutes ago, I asked, would Splyce be able to have a cleaner mid-game? Well, it seems to be exactly that as Whirlib engages down towards the bottom side. Abyssal Voyage used in here, but Whirlib just gets chased out by Chachi. Xerxes there with a flash forward to chase him down. That's one. Norscare and Kobe are here to join this fight if they are needed, but already SK have lost a man.
And look at it, it's SK over-committing to try and find a pick on the strong split pusher. Splyce realized, okay, we can just actually punish that overextension before you look for any type of large objective, and now they have a free mountain on top.
And I do think that's the one thing that we haven't touched on a lot of is if you try and attack the split pusher, the Tahm Kench is very quick to respond. And we've seen it a couple times where in the top lane when Vizichachi was overextended, it looked like he was about to die. Tahm Kench was there, dissuaded the gank. In the bot lane, it looked like Whirlib and Selfmade wanted to make a play. Oh, well, not only is the jungler here, but so is the Tahm Kench. And I think that this is such a valuable asset in these 1-3-1s because it just limits even further the options for SK.
And you also have to ask the question, what is more worth, to attack the solo laner or to attack the 4-man core of Splyce? And you can see right here, the answer is clearly not to attack the side lane because Whirlib goes in, Selfmade can't actually enter the fight because there's no vision on the bottom side. Splyce have done a wonderful job of setting that up so Chachi can push forward, but just thinking about it, if SK commit, let's say 3 members to bottom lane and they get the fight, right? They get the kill, it's all good. What can they actually do off of that? Well, in a 5v4, it's not really enough when you're down 7,000 gold now to get anything over the map, and the other team has the potential to burst down the Baron, especially now that Splyce has the Mountain Drake, so SK need to realign how they want to think about it and go for the big team fight, not the split push.
Well, that's what they're doing. They're forcing it with the Baron. SK already on it, 8,000 HP left on it. Humanoid has the flank, and so does Xerxes. Chachi is pushing up towards that top bottom lane. He's on the inhibitor already. Here goes Humanoid, jumps into the middle of them all. The Ring of Frost, they're on Superior, but he shuffles them back with the soldiers. Organic destruction from Kobe as they take down one, and they're just going to clean them all up. Splyce rout SK. SK had one shot, and they missed it by a mile, and Splyce take them all out.
Splyce were just way too far ahead. They call in the TP, they find the fight around the Baron, and look at this. Kabe playing the bot lane, Vel'Koz has the TP. Are they just going to look for the end because they've got 3 members in the base?
It looks very good for Splyce right now, and I think they're going to go for the game off the back of a single team fight. Splyce are looking to take an edge in the series.
It's been so clean from Splyce. Moment by moment, they knew exactly what they were doing, and after an impeccable early game, an impeccable mid-game, Splyce are 1 game away from winning this round of playoffs.
Great stuff from Splyce. Loved the Tahm Kench and the Vel'Koz bot lane. I think they had a very strong 1-3-1 composition that they executed upon very effectively. And you can see that Splyce is very happy with that game. This was the Splyce I was expecting. Maybe not in the 1-3-1 capacity, but in terms of the clean, the safe, the smart plays, that's very much what I was expecting from this team. And I feel like we're finally seeing what many expected of Splyce.
Yeah, it was very methodical, playing through the 1-3-1, playing through this early game, or even though they ran into some issues with Xerxes looking for ganks around the mid lane that were punished by the side of SK, this team knew exactly how to play the pressure game by putting Chachi in the side lane, by breaking the inhibitor. Look, this comp is not something we see win a whole lot here in the LEC. It's something hard to pull off, but Splyce did it wonderfully.
And I think some of the experience that Splyce have in playoffs is coming to the fore as well. You know, we talked about it. This is their 6th playoff in a row that they're making. They have 17 playoff appearances amongst all of their players combined. And you could just sense that after game 1, they kind of just reset. They settled into themselves. They said, okay, we know we can beat them in the late game. We know we can beat them if we play it perfectly. And then they can bring something new out and just surprise SK with such a strong performance.
What I actually think happened to SK is they twice now have gotten into these late game scenarios where it's boiled down to team fighting. And they made the assumption that Splyce would try and do this once again. So they actually just committed to the team fight late game style. And that actually hampered them a lot because when you think about how SK win games and how they do well, a lot of it is self-made and him influencing lanes and him trying to set up plays. And he had no lanes that he could really play around. He had no opportunities that he could create in the early game. And Splyce, when they drafted 3 winning lanes, well, not 3, they had a losing mid lane that ended up being converted thanks to the early Rek'Sai gank, right? It was just a matter of pressure everywhere that SK had no answer for. And it felt like that they just slowly bled out, and their only option was to force that final fight, which in the end they couldn't do.
But I think you can't really blame SK for expecting them to play towards that sort of more scaling team fight oriented composition, because that's what Splyce have done so consistently. This is the fastest game of the split for Splyce at 26 minutes. And I think part of it is that difference in their composition that we haven't really seen from them up until now.
Well, I think actually the biggest difference is that they had a clean mid-game. And you talked about it because we've seen this team get leads in the early game before. We've seen them come out of laning phase winning. But then it's often they make these mistakes. And I think one of the big mistakes is actually Chachi, who gets caught in a side lane. And do you know how they compensated for that? The Tahm Kench. And every time it looked like he was about to die, Norscarian would show up and keep him alive. So it was almost like they drafted a 1-3-1 style, they got a lead, and then like, what is our one way in which we can lose? Chachi dies. Well, let's draft a way to keep him alive for as long as possible. So I thought it was a very good draft from Splyce, and they executed very well.
And newsflash, this Chachi didn't die a single time that game. Now, this replay brought to you by Alienware is exactly the end of the match. Oh, man. I mean, SK were just...
It was a Hail Mary from SK.
It was a Hail Mary.
They went for it.
Didn't work.
Can't always work out for you. And I think if you're looking at SK now, you have to think, do you go back to the drawing board? Do you do the same thing you tried to do in game 1? Because although it worked for you then, Splyce seemed to have evolved over this best of 5, where SK have kind of stayed stationary.
I need SK to have the winning mid-jungle 2v2. I think it's absolutely the crux of this series. When you see a 0+ Gragas, it's just not going to make it happen quick enough for this team that needs to combat early on and get self-made a lead.
I think SK take blue side next game.
Well, we will see. Splyce are just 1 win away from advancing to round 2 as they're preparing for match point against SK. Don't you go anywhere.